All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blakey Lock Show. It is the college football season preview, and I've brought in the Brain Trust, EBo, and Jack Mac from Barstool Sports. We three of us did an episode before the college football playoff last year, and it was great. So brought you guys back to preview this whole season. How are you guys doing?
Good, really good. Excited for the season. I mean, obviously it's all already underway, but definitely. I mean, we have the biggest FBS versus FCS game I think ever. And I think it'll be the most watched FBS versus FCS game ever.
Yeah, with Colorado, North Dakota State, and there's some really good week one games. I feel like there's more good week one games than we've had in the past. I mean, even week zero, we had probably maybe the best week zero game we've ever had with Georgia Tech, Florida State. The last couple of years, they've been pretty terrible blowouts. And then this weekend, you get Notre Dame, Texas A&M, LSU, USC, Clemson, Georgia, some really, really good Miami, Florida, like you said, and even some games that aren't as big in terms of national title picture, but just of interest with Colorado, North Dakota State, and some other games like that. So, yeah, we were talking, we were going to record this last week, and we were like, oh, as long as Georgia Tech doesn't beat Florida State, like it doesn't really make a difference if we record it this week or next week because futures market really isn't going to change. But obviously that did happen. And the first conference I want to get into is the ACC. So that kind of works out that we can kind of start with that game last week. Georgia Tech beating Florida State in Dublin. I wasn't overly surprised with the result. I was pretty down on Florida State going into this year. I think Clemson and Miami are both better than Florida State in the ACC, so I didn't really have any futures on Florida State anyways. And I think after the game, a lot of people were in retrospect like, oh yeah, well, Florida State basically got worse at like every single position. So why is anybody surprised about this? But I mean, the line was 10.5, like they were supposed to win the game. But looking at the top of the ACC, it's actually now kind of interesting. If you like Florida State, there's almost some value on them at, I think they're like 6-1 right now to win the conference. But EBo, what did you think of that game and kind of how it has shifted the ACC before most teams even play a game?
Well, I mean, that was the classic week zero. It reminded me so much of the Nebraska Northwestern game where Florida State marches right down the field. You're like, holy shit, they might be fine. And then within like a drive or two, you're like, this is not the same team that was around last year. I think the powers, like in the ACC, like we had this gap for a while. That was just like Clemson was the big dog. I think that gap has narrowed quite a bit, and I think there's a lot of teams in that middle tier in the ACC that are starting to get buzz, and I think maybe deservedly so, getting buzz, like the Virginia Techs of the world, the Louisvilles of the world are starting to catch up to like the Clemsons and Florida States of the world.
Yeah, obviously Louisville made the ACC championship game last year. They also had one of the easiest schedules of all time last year, and their schedule is much tougher this year. But yeah, I mean, Clemson and Florida State were pretty much like co-favorites before last week, with Miami just a little bit behind. Miami getting tons of hype, and I'm admittedly fully on the hype train, partially just because I'm a huge Cam Ward fan. It is scary because he can make a lot of mistakes. He's that kind of quarterback that he'll throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, but also maybe 2 interceptions, and they could be 2 really bad interceptions. And then backing Mario Cristobal is also even scarier than anything. I think that's Miami's biggest weakness that could hold them back from winning the ACC or making the playoff or even winning a couple of playoff games is just Mario Cristobal in-game coaching decisions. But I really like the Miami team. I think their wide receiver group is really good. Getting Damian Martinez, the running back from Oregon State. He's a beast if he can stay healthy. And then Cam Ward, like I said, I'm a huge fan of. So it's now kind of them and Clemson at the top of the ACC. Jack, what do you think about, or who do you have winning the ACC?
This is kind of ironic because last year I was so high on them. I mean, I predicted them to win the national championship, and it did not happen. But I am a very big fan of Clemson this year. I think they're in year 2 under Riley's offensive system, and that will be huge. And everyone talks about the transfer portal this, transfer portal that, but I think it's still a 80-20% game where 80% of the work you really have to do is in the recruiting, and you bring in top guys and whatnot, and then you fill in the holes. And the transfer portal is important, don't get me wrong, but people are forgetting that. I mean, Clemson and Dabo are still recruiting at a very high level, and the big question will be Cade Klubnik and the wide receivers, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Adam Randall. I like their tight end, Jake Bringstool, who is actually very talented. And then Phil Maffa is the running back. He won't – I think he'll be very good this year. Obviously, they lose what's his name, the white kid?
Will Shipley,
but I think Phil Maffa will fill in perfectly. And from there, these are guys that, they're top level recruits on wide receivers. Like they're high or mid-tier five-star and Adam Randall, Antonio Williams. And then you have some guys, I think they brought in some freshmen that are freshmen, Brian Wesco Jr. He's a 5-star. Like these are guys, they have talent. Can they perform? We'll see. And then I think for the most part, the defense is just going to be solid. Last year, the defense was really good again, and they're replacing a lot, but the defense is just littered with top end talent. And we'll see. Barrett Carter is a great linebacker for them. And I think they're right there. Miami may be the team that's more talented than them, but it feels like you'd have to be crazy to say Dabo is a worse coach than Mario Cristobal. I think it's not even close. I'm leaning with Clemson. I'm going to definitely be betting them this weekend against Georgia. I think Cade Klubnik in year 2 will continue to take steps forward. They could disappoint me, but I think they'll be in it. And, I'm high on Miami. I think Miami's a team that could lose on Saturday and still go 11-1 and make the college football playoff. It's not like this game will feel big because it's Miami, Florida, but that's a really tough spot, and it's the first game. Then outside of that, I think Syracuse is actually a team to keep an eye on. They're under the radar. Obviously, they're more so heavily transfer based. But Kyle McCord, let's be honest. He's not spectacular, but he's pretty good. And they brought a lot of talent with him. And then I also think, has NC State announced their quarterback?
Yeah, I think they did.
MJ, or is it? No, wait, no, he transferred.
Grayson McCall.
No, NC State is, sorry. I'm mixing up Maryland and NC State. NC State's McCall, right? Grayson McCall.
Yeah, Grayson McCall.
So NC State will always be there. And then Virginia Tech, this is their most hyped for a season in a long time. And I'm really interested to see how good the quarterback really is. It feels like at points he's a guy that he should be good. He's played well, but he's a guy that I don't know if he's elite. He needs to show me that he's elite, Kyron Jones. But you look at Virginia Tech, right? Returning production 4th in the country. That's a team that's also will be right up there. And then the bottom of this division could be bad, or this conference could be bad.
Yeah.
I think Stanford's a team that could be okay or they could be bad. BC, even Pitt, like their kind of new offensive system, whatnot. And then Georgia Tech, I mean, who knows? They could really find themselves in it.
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying on Clemson at the top. I mean, I obviously hate Clemson for personal reasons, but I think they actually are kind of undervalued at this point because I don't know. If I was a Clemson fan, I would be concerned about the Dabo transfer portal thing in terms of like big picture. Like, do we want to be winning national championships still like we were a few years ago? I don't know if the way he's running the program, if they will be able to beat like a Georgia or an Ohio State, like in a playoff game. But in terms of in the ACC and where they are right now this year with the amount of talent they have, I think especially after what we saw from Florida State, I think Clemson probably has the best defense in the conference. And like you said, I think the Garrett Riley, Cade Klubnik now in year 2, I think they'll definitely be better than it was last year. The question is like how high their ceiling could go is basically based on how good Cade Klubnik can be. And like you said, if they can have a real wide receiver emerge as like a star, which has been possibly their biggest issue the last few years. So I think there's a chance that 2 ACC teams make the playoff. I think if Clemson and Miami are both win 10 games and one of them wins the ACC, I think they probably put both of those teams in. I think like a 10 win, like you said, if Miami loses to Florida and loses one ACC game and then loses to Clemson in the ACC championship, I think it would be really hard for the committee to leave out a 10-win Miami team just because of the name brand value that Miami comes with and kind of what their ceiling could be in terms of how good they could be. So kind of how I see it going, which I bet Miami to make the playoff instead of Miami to win the ACC, because I think Clemson is actually a pretty bad matchup for Miami, and they do not have to play Clemson in the regular season. So I think what we could see is Miami win 10 or 11 games in the regular season, and then lose to Clemson in the ACC championship. And then we see Clemson and Miami get into the playoff. And one thing which I don't know, it probably won't move the odds too much because the odds are pretty much assuming that Clemson is going to lose to Georgia. But if you like Clemson futures, waiting a week isn't a terrible idea. They're probably going to lose to Georgia this weekend. And like I said, it probably won't move the odds too much because they're assuming that loss is going to happen. But you might get a little movement in your favor if they go to 0-1 and maybe Miami crushes Florida and looks really good, and then people start buying in on Miami. You might be able to get some better value on Clemson. So that's just an idea. And then just running through some of those other top teams, I agree. I mean, NC State will be there. NC State has a really easy schedule, probably the easiest schedule of the teams at the top of the conference. And if Grayson McCall translates, which I think he can, I don't think going to the ACC, most teams in the ACC, it's really not that big of a jump from the competition that he's been playing against. I mean, like against Clemson on the road, like that's a pretty brutal game that they'll probably lose. But other than that, in conference, they get Wake Forest at home, Syracuse at home, Cal, Stanford at home, Duke at home, Georgia Tech, and UNC. Like that's the rest of their conference schedule is really not that difficult. So I think there's a chance NC State could be the team that sneaks in there just because of their schedule. And then you have Virginia Tech in the same boat. I think there's maybe a little too much hype on them. Just they've been a name that's been floated basically all summer as like a sleeper. So a lot of people are kind of jumping on that train, but they also have a pretty favorable schedule. Although they have to play Clemson and Miami.
The sleeper
So
tag is gone. The sleeper, they're not.
Yeah.
They are full blown hype train at this point.
Yeah.
I think if you had been back in national championship ended, you said Virginia Tech next year. I'm taking Kyron Jones Heisman. I'm taking like Virginia Tech to win the ACC. Then you're on something. But now it's like everyone's in. Everyone's on it. They might be back.
Yeah, and they have to go to Miami and play Clemson at home to make the ACC championship. They probably have to win one of those two games, even if they go perfect everywhere else, which is also not a guarantee. So personally, I'm not buying anything. I think if you are going to buy anything on Virginia Tech, if there's anything that still has value, it would just be the win total. Like you said, I think all those other numbers are pretty much gone. You can get over 8.5 wins. Still at, I think, just like minus 110, minus 115, maybe. I think that's the best way to go because outside of those two big games, it is a pretty easy schedule. Vanderbilt, Marshall, Old Dominion, and Rutgers at home out of conference. And then Stanford, BC, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, and UVA are there other ACC games outside of the big two. So, I mean, they could easily win 10 games, just lose those two games to Miami and Clemson. But assuming Miami and Clemson both have the seasons they're supposed to have, if they have the tiebreakers over Virginia Tech and win those games, then Virginia Tech's season is still kind of shot in terms of playoff. But EBo, do you have your ACC pick, and then we can move on?
It's gonna be. I'm gonna be on the Virginia Tech hype train in terms of.
All right.
Wins. I will be on the Kyron Drones 90-1 Heisman bet. I think he has a lot of rushing upside, and once he started going, granted it was against a weak schedule in the back half of the season, he was a decent quarterback, and they did move the ball a little bit. I believe he is a legit game changer for them.
All right. Yeah, I mean, if they can win one of those two games, then the rest of the schedule puts them in a really good place. One, for him to put up a lot of numbers, and I mean, there's a chance one of those teams finishes with a worse record, even if they lose head to head. So
yeah, I'm still with Jack Mac in terms of like the Clemson, even in a down year, is a good team, losing just a couple one possession games and kind of an anomaly week one game last year against Duke where Cade Klubnik looked completely out of sorts. So I still think 11, 12 win, maybe running the table is very realistic outside of obviously the Georgia game, but 11-1, 10-2, very realistic for Clemson still.
Yeah, I think like I said, I'm going to wait and assuming they lose to Georgia and maybe if Miami, like I said, has a big win over Florida or something and those odds move at all, I think I'll probably be hitting Clemson to win the ACC if that happens. Even if it doesn't move, I still might after this week. But yeah, so I'm on Miami to make the playoff. And I also like Louisville under 8.5 wins and Virginia Tech over 8.5 wins would be my futures from the ACC. But we can move on to the Big 12. It is arguably the biggest change of any of the Power Four conferences. Obviously, SEC getting Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is an immediate contender. The Big Ten getting Oregon as an immediate contender is a big deal. But the Big 12 for for basically our entire lives has basically been Texas or Oklahoma, like which one is going to win the conference. And now both of those teams are gone. And then you have Utah, a new team coming in, is the favorite to win the conference. So the Big 12 is pretty wild this year, and it goes pretty deep in terms of teams that could be contenders compared to the rest of the Power Four conferences, partially because the top isn't as good as the other conferences, but also, you have Utah and Kansas State that are kind of in their own tier at the top in terms of the odds to win the conference. But then you have Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas, Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech, West Virginia, TCU, all 18-1 or better. It's 10 teams, at 10-1 or better. So that's pretty wild. And then you have Colorado after that, who's obviously total wild card, and we're going to talk about them, I'm sure. But just looking at the top, I mean, we've seen Utah win 2 Pac-12 championships in the last 3 or 4 years. Just ruining Caleb Williams' college career basically single-handedly. Never letting him get to a playoff or win a conference championship. And now they're in the Big 12. And I think teams, as we know, like going to Utah, one of the hardest places to play in the country, I think they're deserving favorites. I think if Cam Rising is healthy and plays the whole year, they're probably the best team in the Big 12. Kansas State is obviously interesting because Will Howard transfers to Ohio State. And if you ask a Kansas State fan or people around Kansas State, Will Howard would not have been the starter if he came back to Kansas State, which is part of the reason that he transferred to Ohio State, because Avery Johnson is there, and a lot of people think he's like the truth, like potentially the next great quarterback. He's getting some Heisman hype for this year. I think would maybe be a year too early. But he's the real deal. And then after that, some really interesting teams. So Jack, I'll go to you first. What do you think about the Big 12 and these teams, big group of teams at the top?
Yeah, you summed up a lot of it very well. If I'm looking for value here, I think Oklahoma State is a team that could really I think they should be in that top tier. So plus 750 for them to win is something that I have my eye on. They return an insane amount of production. I'm not the biggest Alan Bowman fan, but he is an 8th-year senior. I mean, he's a 25-year-old playing against kids, so he's going to be very good. I would love to see the defense take a little bit of a step forward this year, but they get Utah at home, and the big game for them will be, I mean, projecting their schedule right now, they're going to be a favorite in every game except for probably the Kansas State game, and you get them plus 750. I'm very interested in that. Iowa State's another team that's intriguing to me. I think Rocco Becht has a chance to be the best quarterback in this conference, even though the quarterbacks in this conference are pretty good. Jalen Daniels, Fafita. You even look at Garrett Green, who a lot of people have in the top 10, top 15 quarterback list. I think I saw PFF have him top 10. I think that's a little bit stretching it, but he has been very good. And then obviously, I mean, Shadur is really, really good. We all know that. And even Daquan Finn at Baylor, or Daquan Finn, we already mentioned Avery Johnson and Cam Rising, but this conference is really loaded with quarterbacks, and I'm interested to see how it turns out. And that being said, I love Oklahoma State plus 750 to win the conference. They may be dogs in that game come December, or maybe in December, wherever they're playing it. Where is it? Jerry's World still, or is that different?
I don't know.
I wonder where they're playing it now. Maybe they have a contract. Like, it would make sense to still play it there, but I would still be very, obviously you would get them at plus 750, and then if they get to that game, even if they're touchdown dogs, which I would be shocked at, you would still be able to, be in a good spot. So I really like Oklahoma State. You are betting on Alan Bowman, but Mike Gundy's a great coach. I know he's never been able to win the big one, quote unquote, but you would be silly to say he's not. Even the job that he did last year, I mean, that team was it felt like was going to be one of the worst teams in Power 5 after the first few games of the year, and they really turned it around. And then obviously, I mean, Ollie Gordon has a chance to be the best player in the conference. So, and just quickly in Colorado, I mean, I think people are really down on them from a kind of inside college football perspective. There's a lot of people, that really, I respect their opinions and whatnot. And, the Bud Elliots of the world, Danny Cannells, whatnot, that are really down on Colorado and think that, like, this is, in my opinion, a very dangerous team. if they get the offensive line together and defense together, which they have a new defensive coordinator they brought in, projecting they in there too deep. I mean, they essentially brought in 15 to 16 new transfers on the defense. If they can put something together, this is like they're good. We'll know a lot about them on Thursday night, and then at Nebraska. That game's so big. I know everyone's focused on Michigan, Texas, which I think is going to be an amazing game. But Colorado, Nebraska, obviously the rivalry there. But if they get past that, people better be ready for like some serious Colorado hype. They could go 4-0 into that UCF game. I don't know. I mean, Shadur is really, really good. We'll see. This team's so much better than last year's team, in my opinion. But they kind of have the Big 12 is they just have a lot of really good teams, not great teams. I don't think anybody can win a national title here. I wouldn't be shocked if none of these teams even won a college football playoff game. But they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of. There's going to be a lot of really great games in this conference, and the Big 12 in the future is I'm really excited for. Obviously, they're going to have a new addition pretty soon, and then everything's going to be perfect. The Big 12 to the future, it's going to be the Power Three. We'll defeat the ACC, and then it's greatness.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about the. It's like when we were talking about the ACC, it's like, oh, do you have to play Clemson? Do you have to play Miami? Do you have to play Florida State? Like, if you're not one of those teams, we're kind of chalking it up as a loss for you. But everybody else, you're probably going to beat, like when you're looking at the other teams. Whereas in the Big 12, it's really, I mean, other than the bottom tier, it's really like anybody could beat anybody on any given week. Like you were saying, all these quarterbacks: Cam Rising, Avery Johnson, KJ Jefferson at UCF now, Jalen Daniels, Rocco Becht, Noah Fafita. Like these are Garrett Green. Like these are all really, really good quarterbacks that on any given week could just have their game of the season and go and beat anybody anywhere. Mm-hmm. You have really, really good coaches. You have, I mean, Kyle Whittingham, I could argue, is the best coach in the country. Mm-hmm. That's not Kirby Smart, because I think he's by himself number one. But Kyle Whittingham's unbelievable. Kleiman's been unbelievable at Kansas State. Like you said, Mike Gundy. There's a lot of Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Lots of really, really good coaches. Gus Malzahn at UCF. So I think between the coaching and the quarterback play, I think this conference is going to get really ugly in terms of teams are just going to be beating each other, which is tough if you want to bet a team to make the college football playoff. I think there's a chance that they only get one team into the college football playoff just because you're going to have a lot of teams with 3 or 4 losses in the regular season, just because these teams are going to beat up on each other, which we've seen from the Big 12 in the past. And now it's, I think, even closer of a group of everybody together. I ultimately think Utah probably will win the conference. I just think Cam Rising's experience, like I said, I think Kyle Whittingham's the best coach in the conference, and their defense is still really, really good. And I think they're going to make the Big 12 championship game, and they have guys that, like Cam Rising, has experience in those big games. He's won conference championship games before. But the 2 bets I'm making outside of Utah is UCF and Iowa State. I'm betting both of them to make the Big 12 championship game. I think one of those 2 teams could be the team that breaks out. The numbers on that right now are they're both plus 450 to make the Big 12 championship game. So obviously one of them is probably not going to make it. There's a chance they both make it, which would be unreal, but I'm thinking one of those 2 is going to make it against Utah. So you're getting basically plus 350 with one of them losing, subtracting a unit. But I really like UCF. I think KJ Jefferson in the Gus Malzahn offense he's nobody yell at me and get mad at me, but he's basically the closest thing to Cam Newton that Gus Malzahn has had since Cam Newton. He's obviously not Cam Newton. not that good, but he's lost a lot of weight apparently in the offseason and is quicker.
They're paying him like Cam Newton. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
I think they paid a lot of money for KJ Jefferson.
Yeah, which also gives me a lot more confidence because I think that's partially Gus Malzahn being like, this is a guy that can run my offense perfectly. Like, do what you got to do.
They have UCF's an interesting team for the future because they have a lot of, and it's just because it's such a huge network because so many people went there, but they have a lot of NIL support. Like I don't know where it ranks, but it definitely ranks at the top of the conference of the Big 12. It's not SEC, but it's like I don't think they necessarily have that much less of NIL money than a Florida.
Yeah, no, they're in a really good place with their coach and where they are now in the Big 12. And so they're going to have running that offense with KJ Jefferson. And then they have RJ Harvey at running back, who was a monster last year. They brought in Penny Boone from Toledo, who was a monster, the best running back, one of the best running backs in the group of 5 last year. So this team's going to be able to run on anybody. And when you look at their schedule from last year, like last year was their first year making the jump up into the Big 12. And when you look at some of their results, they lost to Baylor by 1 point in a game that I think they blew like a 21-point fourth quarter lead or something like that. They lost by 2 on the road against Oklahoma.
I'm looking at post-game win expectancy right now. They had 5 of their losses came in games where they had a post-game win expectancy above 50%, and 3 of those losses were above 85% post-game winning expectancy. So there was a lot of just like very, very close. Like they were right there.
Yeah. I think they were really close last year, and they just had guys that didn't quite know how to win on that level yet, and now they do. Bringing in KJ Jefferson, who has a ton of experience, and just all the guys who were on the team last year, and now have a full year playing in this conference. And then, so that's why I like them. And then I also like Iowa State, just because, like you were saying, I think Rocco Becht is a name a lot more people are going to learn. He basically found out he was going to be the starter last year, like the week of the first game, because Hunter Deckers was supposed to be the starter and got the gambling suspension for the entire season. So it was kind of out of nowhere. Rocco Becht found out he was going to be starting, got a lot better as the season went on, and now he has a full off season. And Matt Campbell is a really, really good coach. And I think one of those 2 teams could find their way in. But EBo, what do you think about the Big 12?
I am very much aligned with you that KJ Jefferson is an unbelievable fit at UCF in terms of they're going to go fast. They got speed everywhere. And I think he's a massive upgrade over John Reese Plumlee. I think John Reese Plumlee at times it held them back in terms of their full potential because they didn't have a true guy. I think KJ Jefferson has shown the flashes of a guy that can shoulder a load for a full game and pretty much will you to victory. So I'm very high on UCF as well, and I'm very high on Kansas State just because I am buying the Avery Johnson hype, not in terms of just talent, but I think the last time Kleiman had a guy like this that really, really fit his sort of offensive scheme of like using the quarterback to run, even though Will Howard could move a little, was Trey Lance when he was at North Dakota State. And you saw he turned Trey Lance into a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So if you can take a 5-star recruit and put him in that same system, I think there's a lot of room for success for Kansas State. I think Avery Johnson's going to have not a Heisman season, but potentially Big 12 Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. I love Kansas State. I'll be taking them to win the conference, and I might sprinkle UCF.
That Avery Johnson. It's crazy. I guess like who will be the best quarterback at the end of the year in this conference? That's I think probably the highest ups. There's so many interesting because even KJ Jefferson has a case. Obviously Shedeur has a case, and then Jalen Daniels has a case. Fafita has a case. Becht has a case. I mean, like it's kind of crazy. And then you have Cam Rising, who's been proven time and time again. Yeah, it's a fascinating conference that a lot of people will kind of poo-poo because they won't be there on the last game of the year, but it's going to be fascinating. This could be a conference that really eats itself too.
I think if you power rated this conference, you'd have about 8 teams between 15 and 40, or 15 and
Yeah,
45.
100%.
They're all right there at like just nipping at the heels of the playoff, but not really, like you said, a playoff winner.
Yeah, like one team could get hot, but they would need some things to kind of break their way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
UCF is another, like I was just looking at their depth chart. I mean, half their defense is transfers. If they can kind of take that step forward, man, like they could be a dangerous team. They have talent. Like, I mean, that's a true power 3, power 4 team now. It's not like, oh, cute little UCF. Like they have dudes on that team. Liam listed a bunch of them, and KJ has his faults, but he's really good.
Yeah, and they have a national championship winning head coach. They're the real deal. So, yeah, I mean, I think it kind of speaks to this conference that I think Utah is going to win. EBo thinks Kansas State's going to win. Jack Mac likes Oklahoma State. We all kind of like UCF and Iowa State as teams that could make runs. So it's super deep. And yeah, I think any given week you could see an upset. And I think it's somewhat similar to the Pac-12 last year in terms of how loaded with the quarterbacks, and you could just see some electric games. But we should move on to the Big Ten. Big Ten, obviously, Michigan, defending national champions, but they are not towards the top of the list of favorites. It is Ohio State, who's basically gone all in on this season, loaded up in the transfer portal, and then Oregon right behind them, who has also had a ridiculously good transfer portal class. And then Penn State is right behind them at 5-1 to win the conference. And then you see Michigan at plus 750, and then it's a pretty big drop off after those 4 teams. I think Penn State is one of these teams that is like happiest of anybody about the 12-team playoff. I think they would have made the 12-team playoff like 3 of the last 4 years or something like that. If settings were the same as they are now. And then Oregon. I think Oregon and Ohio State is closer than people think. I think Ohio State and Oregon maybe number 2, number 3 best teams in the country, just on paper, and what you have in their rosters top to bottom. I think with both of them, the quarterback is kind of going to determine what their ceiling can be. I think Dylan Gabriel is the Heisman favorite at the moment. It kind of has been all offseason, just ahead of Carson Beck. And I think Dylan Gabriel is going to put up ridiculous numbers. I mean, we saw Bo Nix put up ridiculous numbers last year at Oregon in this offense with a bunch of really good skill position players, and they had to replace a bunch of skill position players. Troy Franklin went to the Broncos along with Bo Nix, and but they totally reloaded. And it's, I mean, if you look at that Oregon team last year, they just couldn't beat my guy Michael Penix. He just completely tortured them, beat them in the regular season in a game that Oregon really should have won, completely blew the regular season game, and was super close in the Pac-12 championship game that would have sent Oregon to the playoff probably if they would have won that game. So this is a team that was really close last year. Now competition's a little bit tougher in the Big Ten, although the Pac-12 was really good last year too. But it's probably between Ohio State and Oregon to win the conference, but you could definitely see 3 or 4 teams from this conference make the playoff, between Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, even USC, maybe even Iowa. Iowa has a really favorable schedule. They could win 10 games and be in that contention for that playoff spot if Cade McNamara can be good at all. And then you have a team like Nebraska is really interesting. And some teams towards the bottom that aren't as good, like Maryland or Rutgers, but maybe by the end of the season could be playing better and knock off one of those top teams. So EBo, I'll let you go ahead with your Big Ten thoughts at the top.
So I am a big Penn State believer in terms of the sense that I think they'll be at 10-2. Do I think they are good enough to win the conference? No. Even last year, I was defending Penn State, and defending Drew Aller really, because I think Drew Aller is a lot better than people want to give him credit for, just because he struggled in 2 games against basically NFL caliber players all over the field. I think I'm going to lean something a little bit more contrarian here. I don't think a lot of people are expecting USC to come into the conference and be competitive immediately. I think they obviously point to the defense and maybe they play a little bit softer in the secondary. They're coming to a conference that's maybe more physical. But I do think that pretty much gutting the defensive coaching staff when you have a very highly rated defensive team, maybe in terms of recruiting and team talent, they probably have a top 25 team in that sense. It's worth bringing in, like you bring in Matt Entz from North Dakota State, who's been running great defenses to basically toughen up your front seven. I think it's a very dedicated effort to make talented players have a good system around them. And I think 20-1 is a bit disrespectful for a guy like Miller Moss, who's probably going to be slinging around the field. I mean, even in that bowl game, he was making big time throws, not just like throwing a wide open receivers, like big time throws. I think Miller Moss is not that much of a downgrade in terms of college quarterback from Caleb Williams, even though Caleb Williams is an unbelievable playmaker and maybe one of the greatest quarterback prospects in the history of the NFL. I think Miller Moss is an unbelievable college quarterback, and I think USC 20-1 is a bit disrespectful. So I'll be playing that, and then I'll probably be playing the Indiana win total. I think that's just basically out of respect for my former JMU guys. I think it's talented dudes all over the field. Elijah Surratt, D'Angelo Pons should not have been at JMU. They should have been at SEC school straight out of high school. They are dogs. And they got a massive upgrade at quarterback with O'Rourke from Jordan McLeod. So I think Indiana, while not a danger to go 9-3, 10-2, I think they are worth a look at their win total.
Yeah, it's just 5.5.
Yeah.
I'm on it big. That's my biggest win total bet of the year. Indiana over 5.5. It's basically everything you said. Like normally I don't want to bet an over on a win total of a team with a new quarterback and a new head coach and a bunch of new pieces, but you're basically taking half of the JMU team and the entire JMU coaching staff and just putting them in a new city. So it's not like they totally need to gel and learn how to play with each other. Like I think, and like you said, a lot of them are a lot better, a lot higher talent than Sunbelt talent, and Curtis Rourke is a lot better than MAC level quarterback talent, although the MAC has had some incredible quarterbacks come through the MAC.
They left a lot of the junk behind too, and when they moved on, they didn't bring any. They brought everyone except the safeties and the linebackers who couldn't cover in space. I think they have maybe the number one coordinator you should buy, in Tino Sinceri. He is a quarterback whisperer. He is maybe the number one up and coming offensive mind in all of college football. Tino Sinceri will turn O'Rourke into a maybe second, third team all Big Ten, maybe if he gets it going, gets it clicking. So,
yeah, and I mean with Elijah Surratt at wide receiver, I think they'll be a nasty combination. And speaking of coordinators, I'll just say this really quick and then go to you, Jack. But I think, like you were saying about Penn State, I was a Penn State believer last year and a Drew Aller defender, and obviously that didn't work out. Last year, because again, he played bad against NFL level defenses, but I think the biggest problem was the play calling. They basically didn't let him throw the ball down the field. They were trying to run on like 3rd and 6 and just not really letting him sling at all. They bring in Andy Kotelnicki, who was the offensive coordinator at Kansas, who runs a much faster paced, more exciting offense than we've seen at Penn State in a really long time. And I think it's what Drew Aller needs, is somebody that can basically give him the keys and be like, this is how you run a high level offense, which they did not have last year. I mean, they have some really good talent. They do need to replace a lot on the offensive line would be my biggest concern, but they do have a lot of guys that on paper should be able to replace the talent that they lost. They lost Manny Diaz as defensive coordinator too. He took the head coaching job at Duke, but they brought in Tom Allen, former Indiana head coach, who's a really good defensive coach. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a drop off there. So I took some Drew Aller 50-1 to win the Heisman. I think Penn State is going to be a playoff team, which you need if you're betting a Heisman. You probably need a quarterback who's going to be on a playoff team. So there's only going to be 12 of those. And so if you can get one of them at 50-1, I think if Drew Aller can be unlocked like a lot of people thought he would be last year, I think there's value in that number at 50-1. And I also bet Penn State at minus 140 to make the playoff. Just because I think they, like you said, I don't see them winning less than 10 games. And I think 10-win Big Ten team is getting into the playoffs. So, but Jack, what do you think about Big Ten?
Yeah, I think the team that's the most interesting here is Oregon. I think they have a chance to be, everyone's talking about Ohio State this, Ohio State that, Caleb Downs saying this, Caleb Downs saying that. If this Oregon offense gets going, I don't know who stops it. Evan Stork coming in is unfair because they already had Tez Johnson, Gary Bryant Jr., Terrence Ferguson's a great tight end. And outside of that, they're just loaded. Jordan James is, as long as he doesn't get hurt, he runs really hard, but I mean, as long as he doesn't get hurt, he's maybe the best running back in the conference, which is saying a lot considering how loaded it is. The defense really needs to show up, but I mean, all things considered, this is Dan Lanning is a defensive mind, so you have to believe in that. And Oregon's my pick to win the Big Ten. Ohio State, I mean, they're loaded, but if Will Howard's your quarterback, how loaded are you? I don't know. I have serious doubts about him. I could be wrong. I could look like an idiot. He has won big-time games, but like, what's the difference between Will Howard and Kyle McCord? I'm not sure.
Will Howard's a slightly better runner. I don't know if he's even that much better of a. I don't know if he throws that much better than Kyle McCord. I agree with you on it.
Is the offense that much better this year? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's kind of the same. Obviously, Carnell Tate's coming in and Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman. But I mean, you lose Marvin Harrison, and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate this year. Will they be that much better than Julian Fleming? I don't know. That would be. I think it's the same offense. I know Emeka Egbuka has another year here, but I guess the offensive line's a little bit better. But still, this team's really good. I would be fine with you rating them the number one team in the country, but you have a lot of belief in a quarterback who, are we sure, is that much better than the quarterback that you had last year that everyone ran out of town? I don't know. I would say you could project that, but how much better? I guess the margins are slim considering they were almost in the race to be a national champion last year. Maybe they could have won it. But then the defense should be really good again. But is it that much better than last year? It's probably the same, which is great. Like but these guys that they return right on defense, we know they're really good. JT Tuimalu and Jack Sawyer, but they kind of they don't get me wrong. You want them on your team, and I'm talking about the margins between Ohio State being the best team in the country, or the best team ever, like they're saying, or a top 5 team. Like this isn't like me saying, oh, Ohio State's going to go 10-2 or 9-3. But the defense is like Jack Sawyer and JT, they kind of disappear. Like JT's known for what, that one game against Penn State? Like what? Like and then Jack Sawyer's been a guy that's everyone's been wanting him to do more his entire career. He's good, but can he be elite? Obviously, Caleb Downs is going to be elite back there. Denzel Burke is going to be elite. But it's just like Ohio State, I have concerns, and they're going to be priced as the greatest team of all time. And I think you're going to get some good numbers as you're seeing right now with Oregon. And then Penn State, big question is, do they have the weapons in wide receiver? I think their offensive coordinator is awesome. It's huge, but do they have the receivers to make it happen? Obviously, Julian Fleming comes in. Can he stay healthy? Is he good enough? They lost what's his name, who transferred out in June or July, but it felt like Penn State fans didn't really care that much. But he was their best receiver last year. They have a lot of unproven guys, but Kansas had a lot of unproven guys. And then I don't know. I think a lot of people are forgetting about Michigan. I think if Alex Origi, now this is a big if because I just talked about Will Howard, but if Alex Origi can get any passing going, I don't know. This team could be dynamite. The defense is disgusting. Again,
Yeah.
Like the guy that they brought in, the linebacker they brought in, like it is insane. What's his name? Jashwan Barham. He came from Maryland. Like this guy's disgusting. And then you have Will Johnson, a top pick, and then the interior of the line is all first round picks too. I don't know. It seems like people are just kind of like. Now I get it because of but outside also, I mean, you only return one starter on offense, but let's be real. And I'm the biggest JJ McCarthy guy ever. It's not like that offense was that elite last year. It's like you don't have to but can this offense that has a whole new offensive line, which just looking at their ratings, left tackle's a 5-star, right tackle's a 5-star, right guard's a 5-star, center, which I don't really care about that much, is a 4-star, which is good enough. And then they bring in a left guard, Josh Preby from where did this guy come from? Northwestern. He's played against Big Ten competition. I wish they had a little bit better of a defense, or a little bit better of a offensive weapon at quarterback. Like if they had, just from how people are pricing them, like I think we'll get to this team next conference, but I'm kind of low on a team that they're playing on week 2, and they're getting priced as if they're playing they're getting priced like they're playing at Texas. So I'm really, really intrigued by Michigan. Now it all comes down to Origi because and then Jack Tuttle's like whatever he's been hurt. It stinks that the Jaden Davis is a freshman. I wish they went out and got like a really great quarterback. I don't know if this may be crazy to say. Coming from Arkansas, I think he didn't have I don't know if KJ could have got into Michigan, but you could have got him in. Like he's been eligible.
Make it work.
No, stop laughing, EBo. I don't know if you could get him into Michigan, but if you could have got KJ, he's worth every penny. I think with KJ Jefferson, this team's a national title contender.
Dude, they couldn't get Grayson McCall into Auburn. When are they going to get KJ?
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like Grayson McCall couldn't get into Auburn. Arkansas, no offense, not the greatest school, but like there are some quarterbacks out there that I know they were kind of they were in a weird time because also, is there a chance they get banned from the postseason?
I think there is a chance. And because I think they know that they aren't winning a national championship this year. And if they could self-impose a postseason ban or something to try to get out of it
this year,
that wouldn't shock me if they did that.
Now, I'm just saying, keep an eye on them. And then I agree with EBo and USC. And I'll be honest, I really like Nebraska. I think Nebraska has a shot to really make some noise. And then outside of that, I mean, yeah, like where does Indiana fit in here? Are they in that like Maryland, Illinois, Rutgers tier? Rutgers is another team that great defense, but it's like their quarterback is like gross. Like Rutgers, like they'll go 6-6, and then they'll be like, oh, Rutgers, and then
This is a shot. You're taking a shot right
no,
now.
it's just like
Yeah.
people do like Rutgers is so
shot.
great. They're like Rutgers is so great. Like I love Rutgers, and then they'll just go 6-6 and lose in a bowl game, or like maybe
People are going to
win
be
a bowl
posting the James Gandolfini.
game. Yeah, they'll be
in
like,
the crowd.
"Oh, Rutgers," and then like they'll cover against. Well, I guess they have a pretty easy schedule this year.
Well, also,
who's the pond scum of who's the poverty class of the Big Ten? Like you're saying with Indiana, you think Indiana fits into the poverty class of the Big Ten, or are they in the middle class?
Mid, and then it's like where's Iowa put themselves? I think in the Big Ten there's elite, which USC can get into. I think Nebraska, if Dylan Raiola is really good, could get into. Then there's good, and there's a lot of good. Then there's mid, and then I think like Northwestern could be bad. Michigan State,
I think
Purdue,
Northwestern, Illinois, and Purdue are by themselves at the bottom.
Michigan State, I think, is going to be in that mid.
Yeah,
and if Aiden Childs
could be good enough,
could take them from mid to good. And then it's like Minnesota. Like I think Minnesota could find themselves in the bad.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
they're
what,
not going to be good.
If there's a quarterback I kind of like that's under the radar, I don't hate Ethan Garber at UCLA. But we've seen him in Chip's system. And then that's another thing with Ohio State. It's like, oh, Chip kept like, will he work? Who knows? It's not like it's a foregone conclusion. That man hasn't been an OC for a little bit now. And also it's like, yeah, it's just it's a fascinating Ohio State. It's like, and then it's I just want to reiterate. I'm not saying they're going to be bad. The margins on Ohio State are like best team in the country to like fifth best team. But they're, like I said, they're being priced like they have no questions. It's like CJ Stroud's their quarterback when it's not even close.
Yeah, I have one thing. I do have to defend KJ Jefferson's honor. I did some quick research.
Oh, no, it's fake.
He was on the 2020 SEC Fall Academic Honor Roll.
2020?
Yeah,
oh, nice,
2020.
nice. 2020. The fall
as a
fall
freshman.
2020.
I think probably his freshman year or sophomore year. He was a Fall 2020 Academic Honor Roll in the SEC.
It wasn't his freshman year because KJ Jefferson played in a game in college football against Joe Burrow. So, also a take that I have, Dylan Gabriel being, I think if you play and start at 3 major different schools as a quarterback, you shouldn't be eligible for postseason awards. It's like, it's like, sorry, you're 30. Like, get a job, bro. Like go to a training camp and get cut like Sam Hartman. Okay.
Yeah. Be a man.
Yeah. Be a man.
Yeah, exactly. Be a man.
But
get cut.
Dylan Gabriel should not be eligible. I saw a funny tweet because DJ, it was like when everyone was dunking on DJ and somebody said like, don't worry, Dylan Gabriel, we see you. We know, like you're on team 3 too. We see you.
You're next. One stinker from Oregon. All right, I'll run through my futures that I'm betting in the Big Ten really quick, and then we can go to the SEC win totals, I'm betting Wisconsin under 6.5 wins. You can get plus money on them to go 6.5 wins. I don't think Tyler Van Dyke is good. He was bad last year, and I don't think he'll be good next year. I think Wisconsin's roster is really struggling right now. They have some really tough games. South Dakota, they have to play week 2. That's not a gimme. They play Alabama out of conference. They have to go to USC, Penn State, go to Iowa, Oregon, go to Nebraska. I think that's a 6-win team. I bet Iowa over 8 wins just because of how easy their schedule is. Everything. I think they're a team that a lot of people were like, oh, now that they don't have the Big Ten West, like Iowa's just going to stink now, because that's kind of how they've survived. But they have a pretty easy schedule. They play Ohio State on the road, which they were going to lose to Ohio State anyway, so that works out for them that's a road game. Every other game is winnable. They get Nebraska at home, Wisconsin at home, Washington at home. They play UCLA, Northwestern, Minnesota, like really winnable games, Michigan State, Maryland. So I think if their offense literally can't be worse than it was last year. So I think they probably win 9 games.
No, Cade McNamara may find a way to make it work.
It could.
It could. Of course it could.
It could.
It's nearly impossible to be worse than it was last
I will
year.
say, what's his name? Who's the fat quarterback for them last year?
Deacon Hill.
Deacon Hill is the type of quarterback that I see, and I listen to Billy Football talk about how it's like there's guys getting D1 scholarships that don't deserve it. He's one of them. Deacon Hill shouldn't, like, there has to be 30 to 40 better quarterbacks at the D3 level than Deacon Hill. Not kidding.
100%.
That could go to Iowa as freshmen, being their strength program, get the coaching and everything. They would be better. Like, there's just no shot. He was awful. And I'm sorry, Deacon Hill. Like, I'm sure you're a good guy. Like, you'll have a great career in whatever you do. Football is not it. Same with Cade McNamara, though. Cade McNamara may be not it.
Most of us will go pro in something other than sports. That's for Deacon Hill and Cade McNamara.
The reports from Iowa's practices make it seem like the offense could be worse.
Yeah, he was very bad in their, like, not even their spring game. They did some kind of like scrimmage thing recently, and his numbers were
now
horrific.
That being said, he is probably going up against a top 5 defense.
And they fired Kirk Ferentz's son. It's not the offensive coordinator anymore, which I think will make a.
He may be a scapegoat,
difference.
bro.
Yeah, he probably is to a degree, but I actually like the guy they brought in, Tim Lester, who is the head coach at Western Michigan. Runs a bunch of like RPO style offense. So he's not asking Cade McNamara to like be like a gunslinger all of a sudden. He wants to run like a lot of RPO stuff. So
and Cade,
I don't know.
Cade, to his credit, is like he's athletic. Like Cade's not bad.
Yeah, Deacon Hill is arguably the worst power conference quarterback I've ever seen. So I don't think Cade McNamara is good, but that's why I'm saying I don't think it can be worse than the coach's son like running the offense and Deacon Hill playing quarterback. Like I don't think it's possibly worse. And the defense is ridiculous. And they avoid 3 of the top 4 teams other than Ohio State on the road. They don't have to play Michigan, Oregon, any of the other top teams. So I said Wisconsin. I really like the Indiana over 5.5 wins. Like I said, that's arguably my favorite win total. And then just on the top teams, I agree. I don't think you should buy any Ohio State to win the Big Ten, to win the national championship, anything. Even Oregon, I think Oregon's maybe the 3rd best team in the country, but I still think that they're kind of overpriced everywhere. I think if you want to go with somebody, Penn State, like I said, I'm taking Penn State to make the playoff. And I agree. I'm high on USC. I'm betting USC plus 4.5 against LSU this weekend. I think USC those 2 teams were kind of the same team last year. Really, really good offenses, really bad defenses. I think USC's done more to improve their defense than LSU.
I have I have a wild thing to say.
Go ahead.
Is there a chance Miller Moss is better for Lincoln Riley than Caleb Williams?
I think in terms of a system fit, I don't think that's
Yeah, I think he could
crazy.
I think it's
And
not
I think
that because Caleb is so good that I'm sure Lincoln probably couldn't really even do things because Caleb would just run around and then throw it 70 yards across the field. But then again, you look at the great quarterbacks from his systems, they were kind of Caleb Williams archetypes.
Baker
Kyler,
and Kyler.
yada, yada, yada. Jalen even. I think looking at how Jalen played, Miller's a better Jalen. He doesn't run as much, but I like the fact that he got Jalen to be such the leaps and bounds he took under Lincoln. I think Miller. We'll see. It's a fascinating team.
Yeah, and I think I think you were talking about it a bit, EBo. I think he could arguably be the best quarterback in this conference. I think him, Drew Aller, I guess Dylan Gabriel, but we're saying he's ineligible from being the best quarterback in the conference. So I think it's between those two for the best quarterback in the conference, Miller Moss or Drew Aller. So I don't think it's crazy to say that USC could definitely have some value to make the playoff or to win the Big Ten. So I don't hate that.
I mean, no disrespect to Dylan Gabriel. It's just rules are rules.
No, I agree. I don't mind your rule at all.